That's enough of that. Welcome. Like I said, my name is Shelby. We're in a new sermon series called Relationship Rehab, and we're excited about that. Before we jump into that, I get to share with you something that was pretty cool that happened last weekend. If you are a high schooler in here and went on the ski trip, raise your hand. 3, 4. Yes. How's your knee, Creighton? Okay. Fair to wobbling. Okay. So we went on this ski trip last week. This is the first high school gather trip we ever had. We had about 15 students, which is really cool. And just to give you a mindset behind those 15 students, a lot of them would call the gathering home, but there was a good amount of them that really have no church home. And so they would now say that the gathering is kind of their church family, which is awesome. But we went to this place called Snowbird Outfitters. And Snowbird Outfitters, it's kind of like, think about your camp environment. There's bunk beds, cabins. They have some crazy obstacle courses and stuff like that. They had this one swing. It's a 3-person swing that you get harnessed in, and they pull you way up high. And then you've got to like reach around. It's so old-ish. There's no technology there. You got to reach around and pull the cord, and when you're way up high, it swings you down like that. It's sweet. You can hear the cables rickety, and I mean, it's nice. But the students did that a bunch, and me, Grant, and Ashley, the leaders, we were like, all right, well, we need to do this. So we got on, and we showed the kids how it's done. We first verified the weight limit, and we were good. And we get on the swing, we get pulled back, and my daughter Elise, she was on the trip, and so she went out front and was recording us from out front, and so she's like up like this with her phone, and we're swinging, and we're yelling, and it's a fun time. The kids are laughing, making fun of us, and especially Ashley, she was really scared. And then, after a while, it kind of fades off, momentum slows down, and so I get bored up there. And so I do things, whenever I'm bored, I want to create some excitement, and the best way to create excitement in my family is to scare people. And Elise is down in front of us, videoing us like this, and we're going right over her head, and so I said, Grant, watch this. And I kicked these shoes, I kicked one shoe off, meaning just to scare Elise. But the problem is, Elise wasn't paying attention, and I have really good aim, I guess. And size 13 Vans just nailed her in the face, straight in the face. She's all right. So, needless to say, right after that moment, we had to have relationship rehab. She chased me with the shoe and hit me with it. I'm a really good dad. But man, for some of us, this is a hard pastor shift. For some of us, we go through 2019, or we went through 2019, and it feels like a size 13 van just hit you upside the face. And the hard part about that, like that hurts in and of itself, but the hard part about it is when it's coming from someone who's supposed to love you, like a dad, or like a spouse, or like a child, or maybe something with work. Like you're in 2019, and it just feels like you're just getting hit over and over and over. And so you come out and you're going into 2020, and you're excited for just to turn the page on 2019. And you're like, good riddance, 2019. I'm ready for 2020. And for some of us, that's us in this room. We've come to this place. We're ready for 2020. We're ready for the newness that 2020 brings. Or some of us, maybe 2019 wasn't all that bad, but you come to this place, you're like, all right, 2020, I know the resolution thing, but I'm not all about the resolution thing, but I see that there's some habits in my life, like eating 5 ho-hos a day that maybe I shouldn't be doing. And so you start to dwindle that down. You set maybe some goals like this year, I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm going to do a little bit different thing. It triggers us to make some sort of change in our life. And this is why I'm so excited that we're starting 2020 off with this sermon series. Because right here at the very beginning of 2020, we're going to take an intentional look at our relationships. And we hope that from this sermon series, some really healthy conversations happen in your homes. Some really healthy conversations happen in the relationships around you. That maybe 2020, your relationships will be a little bit more intentional, be a little bit more deep, and be a little bit more healthy at the end. So, that's where we're going. If you have your Bibles, grab them, take them out. We're going to go to the book of 1 Corinthians. It's in the New Testament. 1 Corinthians is written by this guy named Paul, and it wasn't a book at first. It was a letter to this church or this gathering of people in this community called Corinth. This guy named Paul, he's really interesting. He walks around and he starts these little gatherings. He starts these little Jesus-following movements from town to town. You can call them churches, but they're not like churches we think of today. And these Jesus-following movements are changing their communities. They're doing really big things. And Paul goes around place to place, and he kind of gets these things going and tells the people about the gospel of Jesus, and it starts a fire in their soul, and they go and change their community. They love their community. And one of those communities that Paul did that in is this church of Corinth. But like things often do, sometimes you have a really exciting relationship or something new, and then things get sour. And this church of Corinth, by the time Paul, what we're going to read today, by the time he writes this letter, the church of Corinth, it's starting to get some division. People inside of it are planting their flags. I'm glad we sang that song before this, because it's like people were planting their flags in anything but the simple gospel. In the church, they were people that were supposed to be united on the fact that Jesus loves them, that he is who he says he is, that he died on the cross for us, and then that we ultimately believe that he came back to life on the third day. The people that are supposed to be united on that fact, they started getting split up on all these other different facts, and there grew to be these factions. And so Paul starts to write this letter. And out from that letter comes what we now call 1 Corinthians. Probably the most famous chapter in 1 Corinthians is chapter 13. Maybe if you got married, did anyone read a part of chapter 13 at their wedding? A couple of you? Yeah. So that's probably where it's read most. But the funny thing, Paul isn't writing to married couples. It's not a marriage passage. It's not meant for weddings, although the principles are really good for marriage. But that's why I guess let me pause here and say this. Relationship Rehab, this series isn't just about marriages. So if you're not married, that's okay. This series is for all relationships. I mean, chances are we have relationships in our life and all around us that need a little bit of work. Maybe it's with a boss or with a coworker or with a child or with a cousin or that crazy uncle. We all got someone in our families that maybe need a little bit of work. So we're going to use this chapter 13, to try to figure out what it means for us to build a foundation, a healthy foundation for a relationship. So before we get to chapter 13, we need to start in chapter 12. And Paul is going through chapter 12, and he's basically laying out this argument in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 that, hey, there are a bunch of different, to take out the Jesus language, there's a bunch of different talents that people have. People have different gifts. Some people are really good teachers. Some people are really good at discernment, knowing what's to come, and on and on and on. And if you're a Jesus follower, we say it this way: we believe that God has given us certain spiritual gifts. And Paul says that we all play a unique role in that. We all have different gifts. And he ends this chapter in chapter 12. He says, know that we all have different gifts. He asks the question, is everyone a teacher? Is everyone an apostle? Does everyone do miracles? And the answer is obviously no. And so think about that in your context. Does everyone in your relationship balance a checkbook? Probably not. Does everyone in your relationship do the dishes on time? Probably not. So Paul's going after this super high gifting, which is spiritual gifts, which is the highest, we believe, the highest version of that possible. And he ends this chapter 12, and he kind of says this: hey, it's good for you to try to obtain these things. If you have some sort of sense of level that God has given you the ability to teach, it's good for you to try to live that thing out. It's good for you to try to kind of build that skill set up. And so if you would have asked these Christians back then and said, hey, what's your resolution for year 30? They would have said something like maybe, I feel like God has given me the gift of to teach, and so I'm going to try to build that up. And so you zoom that out and you put that in your context today. My question for you is, maybe you have this spiritual thing, but you probably have some sort of goal in your life. How many of you guys have resolutions right now? 3. All right. Maybe you don't have a resolution, but you've got something inside. You're like, all right, I do want to improve this year. I want to change something this year. Maybe it's something like I want to have more intentional conversations at home. I wanted to get in less fights this year. I want to lose 20 pounds. Maybe it's something like I want to buy that boat I've been waiting for. I want to get that promotion that I've been waiting on. Whatever it is, Paul comes out and he says, hey, it's good that you are chasing after these things, which in his context are really spiritual things. But for you, it's okay that you're chasing after, you're trying to obtain these other things. Hopefully that the things that you're chasing after are wise. I want to lose 20 pounds. That's probably a wise thing. I want to read more books. That's probably a wise thing. And Paul says, that's good that you're doing that. The question that we're going to wrestle with is, what is the most wise thing to go after? I love how Bob Goff says it. He says this: I used to be afraid of failing at something that really mattered to me. But now I'm more afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter at all. That's what we're going to try to figure out today, because Paul says at the end of this chapter, you guys are going after something, and for them, it's the highest level, like to use God's gifts that he gave you to go preach the gospel, to go tell people about, the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, whatever it is, like that's really good stuff. But Paul says there's something even more. Let's take a look here at the end of chapter 12, verse 31. It says this: and I will show you a still more excellent way. Paul says, whatever you're going after in life, there's something more. There's something more that I want to tell you about. So then we go on to chapter 13. Back in the day when he wrote it, there wasn't different chapters. It wasn't divided like that. It was kind of straight on. Go to chapter 13, and he starts right off. He says, look, here's what I mean. If I speak the tongues of men and of angels, so let's think about that. If I know all the right words to say, if I am really good and eloquent with my speech, if I say all the right things at the right moment, if people are hanging on every word that I say, if in relationships I know exactly how to get people to do the things I want, like they're all buying in because of the words I'm saying, if I know the tongues of men and of angels, but have not, what's that word? Love. I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And you guys know this is true. Even if you're not a believer, you know this is true. I mean, think about this. Maybe there's someone in your life that has said with their words they love you, but their actions maybe demonstrate something else. Now, I know that I do this. Like sometimes I tell my kids, hey, I love you so much. But my actions say, I love Facebook more. And so that's a weird tension there. I just become eventually like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Like the words I'm saying, they're void of anything. And words are important. We're going to talk about that in a couple weeks. But what he's saying here is you got to have love. Like love isn't stagnant. It doesn't just stay still. Love's got to do something. Your relationship has to have something in it that backs up those words. And then he continues on. He says, and if I have prophetic powers, and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains. So he says, look, in your relationships, let's say you go out and you're buying all these relationship books, you're like the expert on relationships, or you have all the knowledge in the world about Georgia football, or you've got all the knowledge in the world about whatever it is at your profession, and you've got all the knowledge in the world about whatever that thing is, and you've been seeking after it, or you have all the faith in the world, like you're a really big, all-believing person and Christ, follower of Christ, and you really believe that God's existing, you really believe God's working in life, He's still alive. He says, in all of that, if you don't have love, you're nothing. And if you have all the knowledge of your relationship, you know where your spouse came from, you know what makes them tick, you know what your kid went through, you know what makes them tick, you know what pushes their buttons, you know what they like, and you've got all of this knowledge, you have faith in them, you love them, but you don't love them, with actions, you're nothing. So the question then at that point is, what do we do? How do we prove that we love? I mean, Jesse talked about this a second ago. It's like you come into a place like this, and like, well, the way, we're at church, the thing they're going to say is to give of myself and to give all that I have, and then I'll prove my love. But Paul talks about that, and he warns us. He says this, he says, listen, if I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned as a sacrifice, but have not love, I gain nothing. Parents, this is a warning to us. I hear parents talk all the time. They come to me like, hey, I just don't know what's up with Susie. Like, she gets whatever she wants. Like, I don't know why she's walking away from us. I've bought her everything she ever needed. She can do whatever club she wants. Like, I don't know why she's walking away from us. Paul's saying, look, you can't buy love. You can't buy the heart of your kids. You can't buy the heart of your spouse. I mean, it may work temporarily, but you can't buy the heart of your relationships. If I give all that I have and I deliver up my body to be burned, I have nothing. But have not love, I gain nothing. So what is it? What's the point of all this? We're chasing after things. We're trying to set up all these goals. Paul's saying, look, the most important thing in your relationships is love. The most important things in your relationship is love. I mean, if you want to start 2020 off on the right foot, I want you to think about when you leave here today, I want you to do like a self-audit on your love and your relationships, not how they've loved you, how have you loved them? And we're going to expand on that a little bit more throughout this sermon series. We're going to dive into what this type of love looks like and what it means. But ultimately, I want you to take away this idea. This is actually chapter 14, verse 1. This is right after this love passage. He says this. Here's what I want you to know. Let love be your highest goal. In your relationships, let love be your highest goal. In your jobs, let love be your highest goal. In your marriage, let love be your highest goal. When you walk into this place, let love be your highest goal. When you go and pump gas at the gas station, let love be your highest goal. We say it a little bit differently here at the gathering. We have our core values, and one of our core values is relationships are the win. Relationships are the win. Like, that's what motivates us, and we have to hold each other accountable to that all the time. It's easy to get caught up in, well, they said this, or he did that, or, I'm trying to get this project done. But behind all of that, let love be our highest priority. Relationships are the win. See, we believe that when you live life where love is the goal and relationships are the win, it changes your world. It'll also change the world of the people around you. Standing on the truth that God himself, God, the being of God, is love. When you love like this and you make it the number one priority, you're standing in the truth that God is love. Paul says this in Galatians 5:6. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. And I just love that verse because there's so much weight there. He doesn't say the only thing that counts is just love more. He says the only thing that counts is faith. Faith in what? Faith that we were loved first. Faith in Christ. That's what gives us the ability to love like Christ. The only thing that counts is that type of faith expressing itself through love. And man, if we get that right, it'll change relationships. It looks past all this junk that you're typically dealing with, and it changes the game. I read this story a long time ago, and I've wanted to share it with you all for quite a while, but I thought this would be a good time because I saw this type of love in this story, and it just shows me when I read it like how far off I am. If you've ever heard of Bob Goff, go read him. He's got two books. One's called Love Does, and the other is called Everybody Always. And in Everybody Always, Bob Goff talks about this time where he experienced this challenge of loving people. I call Bob Goff like the love doctor, but not in like a weird way. Like, this dude is passionate about loving people. When you read his book, you're like, what? And it's just crazy. But one of the stories he talks about is he travels to Uganda a lot. And he's in Uganda, and he learned about one of the problems that Uganda has is they have these witch doctors. And the witch doctors, they take the little kids and they mutilate the little kids as a sacrifice, and then they leave them to die. And Uganda is deathly afraid of charging these witch doctors because they believe that there's real power in the witch doctors. And they also don't have any survivors and no witnesses. So this really started weighing on Bob Goff's heart, and he goes there, and he eventually finds out about this little boy named Charlie, who's 8 years old. And Charlie was kidnapped from his home and taken outside of the village by a witch doctor, mutilated, cut off his body parts, and left to die. But Charlie survived. And so Charlie was one of the only survivors from one of these types of attacks. And Bob Goff heard about this story, and it just weighed on his heart of injustice. And he wanted to seek justice in this situation, so you would understand this is something only Bob Goff can do. He went to the Ugandan government, and he asked them if he could represent Charlie in a trial. And the Ugandan government said yes. So Bob Goff, with justice on his heart, began to interview Charlie and find witnesses and collect evidence, and in that process, he grew his heart towards Charlie a little bit more, and somehow, this is crazy, somehow someone in the States found out about everything, and he's like the premier doctor in fixing this type of situation with plastic surgery, and he messages Bob Goff. He says, hey, I'm gonna pay for this entire surgery if you can just get him to the U.S. And so Bob's now like, he's on one side trying to fight for justice for Charlie, on the other side he's like, I got to get him here to figure this all out, and he takes a step forward, and it just seems like if you've ever been in that process trying to get someone who doesn't have a visa here without the parents, like it's just a weird thing, and ended up, he figured out the best way to do this, the only way possible really to do this, because there's so much, it's not just one surgery, you got to keep coming back for follow-up and check-up and stuff, was to actually adopt Charlie. And so Bob Goff goes over there, walks through that process, ends up adopting Charlie. Charlie flies back with him, gets surgery done, and there's Bob Goff building this love, and his whole family building this love into Charlie. Charlie's now their little boy. And Charlie starts to open up and tell more about this tragedy that happened with the witch doctor. And this injustice and kind of this anger starts to come into his heart. So he continues with the trial, and ended up, Charlie won. This witch doctor got put into prison for life, and it was in the highest maximum security prison in Uganda. And Bob Goff flew back to the States kind of like, yes, I did it. Justice is served. But then things started weighing on him. Let love be your highest goal. Let love be your highest goal. But I got justice. Let love be your highest goal. But we won. This villain is put in the prison. We set the stage for all of Uganda to prosecute witch doctors. Let love be your highest goal. So he decided to go back to Uganda to build a relationship with the witch doctor that mutilated Charlie. And he walks into this maximum security prison, which the warden didn't want him to go to at all because it's full of really, really dark people. And he walks in, and there's the witch doctor. There's Bob. He's chained up and got handcuffs on him. And Bob walks in, and the Ugandan says, this witch doctor looks Bob in the eye and says, Bob, don't worry, I forgive you. And Bob's like, what? You forgive me? What did I do? And the witch doctor already knew something that was in Bob's heart. He said, I know you hate me. Let love be your highest goal. Bob started to build this relationship with the witch doctor. Eventually, this witch doctor turned his life over to Christ. It was such a, sudden shift in his heart. Bob would go meet him and wash his feet, just hang out. Bob admits in the book, you got to read it, it's amazing. He admits it was really a hard relationship. At times he didn't want to be there, but he continued to run through that process, or that reminder of let love be your highest goal. This witch doctor came to Bob and he said, hey, can we spread the gospel around this prison? Bob said, I would love to do that. He goes to the warden says, no way, you're not doing that. So the witch doctor took it upon himself to start to have revivals inside the prison. And other murderers, other child molesters, other people that were hurting society started giving their life to Christ one by one. But the remarkable thing is because of that relationship, Bob started to see all other witch doctors a little bit differently. And he started to go to them one by one, and he would ask them, hey, if love is my highest priority, what do you need from me? How can I make your life better? And overwhelmingly, the answer was, we don't know how to read, we don't know how to write, we have no access to education. So it just would get them stuck in this other world because they had no way out. And so Bob started a school in Uganda that was designed specifically to teach witch doctors how to read and how to write. But get this, in order to graduate, there's only 2 books that you have to read. The first one is his own book. He needed sales or something. But the second book is the book that we're reading here. The second book is the book that became famous across the world, not because of what it says about justice. The second book is becoming famous across the world, not because of what it says about God's wrath, but instead about what it says about how He loves us. It's the Bible. In order to graduate, you have to finish and read the gospel of Jesus. People would graduate from that, and not all of them would become Christians, but their life would be different because love was the highest goal. And Bob Goff is changing, not just him, that whole group is changing Uganda's culture because love was the highest goal. Not justice of the witch doctors. I read that story and I say, man, Bob's doing that, and here I am kicking my shoe off at my daughter. I think the whole world is just a bunch of people waiting on someone else to move first. Wives waiting on their husbands to make a move. Husbands waiting on their wives to make a move first towards love. Kids waiting on their dad to make a move first towards love in the relationship. A neighbor waiting on another neighbor to make a move first in love towards the relationship. I believe that the entire world is a bunch of people just waiting for someone to say, I love you. How can I help you? What if 2020 was the year that this group of people broke that cycle? What if 2020, when we sat down and we had a relationship rehab conversation with our spouse, we start with saying, hey, I'm so sorry. I haven't loved you the way I want to. But make sure it's not empty words or it just becomes a racket, like an ice machine in a cafeteria. Some of you are sitting here today and you're like, Shelby, you don't understand what I've gone through. You don't know my story. You don't know how my spouse treated me and my ex treated me. You don't know how my dad treated me. You don't know how my mom treated me. And you're exactly right. I don't. In fact, I would double down as I can't imagine that Even if he told me, I wouldn't get it. I'm sure it hurt. But this is what makes the gospel so freeing. The only way we can love like this is because we've been loved like this. The only thing that counts is faith in that truth expressing itself through love. The thing that makes us different than the world is we believe that Jesus came into the world right at the perfect time when the world was proclaiming to God, we don't need you anymore. In the most messy way possible, God said, you know what, I love you, I'm going to come rushing down in the world for you. And then while Jesus was hanging on the cross, he had a bunch of people spitting in his face, ridiculing him, stripping him naked, treating him like crap, and there was Jesus standing on the cross, hanging on the cross, saying, you know what, I love you. Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. And in the end, Jesus said these powerful words that said, it is finished. See, love doesn't hang on to the idea of being right. Love doesn't hang on to the idea of having justice. Love, the gospel type of love, is founded on the idea that it is finished. Let it go and go love the people in your life a little bit more. That is what will change the world. We have a chance to respond right now, and there may be someone sitting next to you that you know that you've said the words for so long, but your actions haven't showed it. And so you have a chance to just put your arm around them and let them know, I want to talk to you later. You have a chance now to respond to God. I don't know what that means for your life. I mean, I don't know what's going on in your world, but now's a chance. We just want to invite you to have this open invitation to respond however you want. But I pray that this sermon series and this message today allows you to start to take inventory on your life. Is love my number one goal? I pray that it's the start of a conversation beyond these walls. Let's pray. Father, we love you.